Yes, I'm calling this meeting to order. I have the fake conch and I will be speaking on this matter here. So thank you all for joining us. Now I will hand it over to my co-host. If you want to grab the conch real quick.
Oh, thanks, man. I got it. Oh, yeah. Okay. I've got the conch now. Listen. um, and with that, welcome to this month's episode. I still have to get used to that. This month's episode of the 800s. You just heard from my co-chief host Adam, and I am your fellow co-chief host Alex. And as always, thank you to the man who in the background who makes this all happen, Alan. Give yourself a round of applause in the chat. And with that, why don't we just dive right into the plug so we can get talking about the book.
Sure thing. If you joined us for our pre-show, you heard some music that was Fearless First from Incompetech. If you would like to check out what other audio marvels that are available to you from Incompetech, head over to incompetech.filmmusic.io and sample some selections. Otherwise, if you'd like to know more about us and what we do, head over to dmstable.com. There you can find a whole bunch of other links, such as dmstable.com/audible, which will get you a free trial to Audible, Amazon's audiobook platform, my personal way of listening to / reading these books. We also have dmstable.com/Etsy, which is where you can find all sorts of nerd memorabilia, including 3D printed stuff and cool graphics for your desktop or other visual needs. Other DM's table links. We got a YouTube channel that you should check out. We're at DM's Table on YouTube as well. The link is below the video. We post all of our videos to YouTube, including these chats, as well as anything else that we might come up with, such as Roll with Advantage podcast that aired a while ago, some book talks or book reviews and stuff. So check out our YouTube channel. If you'd like to reach out to us on social media, we have Facebook and X. We are at the DM's Table on Facebook and at DM's Table on X. And finally, if you would like a more intimate, personal conversation with us, you can hit us up on our socials to get a Discord link to our server. Our Discord is full of nerd chats, not just books, but 3D printing and all sorts of nerd culture. So if that interests you, reach out, hit us up. We'll get you that link. But with that, Alex, back to you.
All right, so this week on the 800s, we will be discussing the classic novel Lord of the Flies by William Golding. A group of young British boys find themselves stranded on an isolated island when their wartime evacuation airplane goes down over the Pacific. Fair-haired boy Ralph and fat boy Piggy find a conch, summoning the rest of the boys scattered by the crash landing. With Ralph as their elected chief, they begin to govern themselves while working to survive, get rescued, and of course, have fun. Order does not last long, though, as the boys give in to fear and their worst instincts, all under the empty yet watchful gaze of the Lord of the Flies.
With that, I'll give you a quick rundown of how our show operates. We are a discussion channel. What that means is Alex and I will pose a topic or question to discuss. He and I will discuss our own opinions on that topic, giving you guys in chat the opportunity to type up your own personal feelings about the topic at hand. And then we'll check out chat, see if anybody threw up something noteworthy, and then we'll mention that or chit chat about it or move on. At any point, if you guys have anything you would like to discuss about Lord of the Flies, feel free to throw it up in chat. Alex and I watch the chat religiously for topic ideas. So really, we keep an eye over there sometimes. So if you have something you want to talk about, throw it up in chat at any time. And next time the conversation lulls, we'll snag it and throw it out there for the world to see and judge, and most importantly, discuss.
And as always, this is a show geared towards adults. We do cover adult content and themes, including in this book, there are some versions of the book where Piggy drops an N-word with a hard R at the end, so trigger warning on that one, and for, well, just general murderousness, I guess. Yeah, so bring kids around at your own discretion. Also, similarly, while we try not to swear, it does happen sometimes, not by us. Damn you, Piggy. Also, we're trying to create a fun and supportive community over at DM's Table, one where everybody can feel free to share in all the things that they like, love, and are passionate about without any fear of teasing, reprisal, or other forms of, general taking people down. So in sum,
be nice or fuck off.
That worked surprisingly well.
Oh,
that was good. That was good. Let's jump into it. We've chit-chatted about our show long enough. Alex in chat, what were your first impressions of Lord of the Flies?
So I read this one way back in like 6th grade, so this has been a while. I don't know if Adam or Alan remember, but there was like a giant book fair thing where you tried to read as many books as you could, and you had to go to like different classrooms to discuss them to get points and whatever. And so this was one of the books on the list, and it definitely hits different as an adult than as a kid.
I hear that.
I think as a kid, I think it was a lot easier to identify with certain kids in the group. Whereas my first impression of most of the kids, like from the very beginning, is like, this is a bunch of unlikable people. I get they're kids, but like they are super unlikable. and I was just having a bit of a hard time, but like it's a bit trickier also knowing contextually that this is an allegorical book by nature. So I can't expect it to have the kind of world building and plot movement that we might have, or the character story in like high fantasy, or the character stories that we have in some of the like personal stories of fiction that we've read before. And I think it kind of sets that tone, like that unique tone right from the get-go, is that this is like, here's the situation. We're going to identify a few characters that have a very specific purpose in the story, and this is the setting that is going to drive said purpose in the story. And it is very quick and upfront about those things, partially because it's not a super long book, but also because it is trying to tell a very specific narrative. And I think the way it's structured is very apparent from the beginning. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, just like you were saying, I did first read this in grade school many, many, many years ago. I distinctly remember the kids being far less annoying back in the day. I think that speaks to the author's ability to write preteen children accurately. But so it's pretty hard to speak to first impressions when you first took your impressions years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that comment there, Alex. Many, 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 many years. But for me, I was excited to jump into it and see how I enjoyed it this time around. If it would be different now that I was an adult reading it instead of a child. Um, and I gotta say, it did end up being different. So we'll leave that for later. But
Well, VS Drake says that this was their first read through of it, and that this book was painfully descriptive, but managed to be interesting enough to complete. Surprisingly, the biases for Lost and other stories, the bases for Lost and other stories, where a small group of people are stranded and need to survive. Yeah, I did pick up a little bit on Lost vibes, especially like right from the beginning when one of the Lilans is like the beast. And then like there's these varying descriptions of what it is. It's a snake, but it comes out of the ocean and it's like all over, and then it goes up in the trees. But yeah, I'm with you, Adam. Like I think it's pretty apparent that like the guy wrote kids because we identified with them as kids, and now as adults we're just like, you kind of suck. Like I think the best example of that though is Ralph. He's the protagonist supposedly, and yet I was just like, you're a giant asshole. And maybe that's where VS Drake catches on the evolution of writing a little bit. Is I'm not sure how much of that is evolution of writing in like how far things have come in time, or if it's more like thematically we don't do stuff that's like that heavy-handed when it's allegorical, because you need Ralph to fit an archetype, you need Piggy to fit an archetype in order to tell like a very specific story that's meant to play out as having specific sides or viewpoints. Mm-hmm. And maybe that is a thing that has changed with time, but yeah, there's a certain lack of subtlety to it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Beast real quick here. Okay. Obviously it's a major theme throughout the book. What do you think of the kids' interpretation of the Beast, especially pertaining to the part where the parachuting man comes into play?
Well, we're starting right off the gate with like bringing out the big guns, because like this is, I think, one of the primary themes of the book, obviously, is what fear does to us as people. And you have it happen with kids so that it can take hold quickly in a way that it wouldn't with adults, because adults have more options. They have available to them in as far as survival goes and defending themselves. They have the ability to rationalize things in a way that kids can't. And I think actually Golding does a good job of showing how these little tidbits of fear that start with like the youngest kids, like the kid that you'd expect to be scared because they're in an unknown place, it's dark. Yeah, there's other kids around, but they're used to having adults to figure stuff out for them. And it starts small, but it just like it stays there, and it burrows in until it becomes this thing that applies to anything that is other, anything that is unknown. It is that fear of the dark, fear of what's in the bushes, the fear of the shadow and the night, that sort of thing. And the fact that it is kind of formless from the beginning, while taking the form of things that it would be rational for a kid to be afraid of, was actually like a great decision, because then you can have it kind of cloak even an adult. And this adult happens to unfortunately parachute in the worst possible place and time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just happen to the adult either. Like the adult is probably the worst. Like it's it's the worst example up to that point because it is like the thing that they've been looking for is an adult to kind of take charge of stuff, and the closest thing they seem to have is Ralph and kind of Jack. But then it all of a sudden starts to turn inward in their group in the same way it turns inward into their own minds, where they apply it to Simon. You know, all because and Simon was the one who had figured stuff out. So I think it was really well done in such a way that it has a form enough to be scary for the kids, but is formless enough to be applied to anything. And like when you see it being applied to anything, that's that moment with the parachuters, like, oh, this fear has really taken hold of these kids, you know.
Yeah, I thought the beast part was particularly well portrayed, especially considering that initial introduction to it, where it was like, oh, it came out of the. I saw like a squiggle come out of the ocean, and then it turned into the trees and stuff. Because like, if you think about what a typical kid goes through at nighttime at that age, it's like you see the shadow of a tree in your room and you go, oh my gosh, I saw that move. There's somebody in my room, right? And then you have your parent come in the room and go, no, silly, that's just a tree. That's just the shadow from the tree. But on this island, they don't have the parent to be like, no, silly, you're just seeing stuff and your mind is playing tricks on you because it's the middle of the night. You're filling in the gaps of what you saw. Nothing's actually there. And I love the part where the guy parachutes in and they're all like, oh my God, it's a beast. Ah! Because, like, of course, that's what they would think. Because essentially how it went down was somebody went, hey, I think there's a beast. And then all the other kids were like, oh, yeah, beast. Yep, that makes sense. So then, of course, as soon as something unknown is in the shadows, that's the beast.
Yeah, and like even you mentioned like there's nobody there to say it's not real. They do technically have Ralph, but Ralph is just another kid, and that shows the difference between like a trusted authority figure and not. And I think that was actually another good allegory for the way that like even adults act is when there isn't a trusted authority figure. You can have somebody telling you it's not real, but if you don't trust the authority figure, it means nothing, you know, and it means that you're going to go with like a literally insane amount of confirmation bias, you know, like, this is the thing that it is in our head, and we're going to make it that thing whether it is or not, you know.
Yeah, I agree with what V.S. Drake is saying, and that's kind of what I think the strongest point of this book is the author clearly understood how to get into the mindset of kids.
Yeah, and I think he definitely knew the difference between like how kids and adults would react, but I think he also did a good job of showing how these are things that are at the core of pretty much all of humanity. Kids are just going to show it faster and easier and in more extremes, you know. And you know, he put them in the perfect situation for that too. One of the things I would like to ask about, if you're okay with moving on from the beast specifically,
Yep, that's fine.
is which one of the kids stood out to you the most and why, aside from Ralph the protagonist and Jack the antagonist? Like
probably Simon, just because he seemed like the character that was there to not necessarily lead, but have developed more maturity and was like, guys, this is what we got to do. I don't want to lead. That's not me, but I understand a more right course of action than what we're taking. And it just kind of goes to show the crowd mentality of obviously what happens to him in the end. If even if you are right, you are 100% right, you are undoubtedly right. If every single other person there has some other idea of what's going on, you're wrong.
So Simon is the one who stood out for you for that reason, and Simon is also the one that I was thinking of as well. Like, it'd be easy to go to Piggy, but like Piggy is very clearly just like, I'm the voice of pure logic and reason, whereas Simon is the only one that has any like real depth to the way that he thinks about things. He thinks about things with kindness and empathy. Also some logic, maybe not as smartly. Like, he might not have like the knowledge base that Piggy does, but like you said, he's willing to come in there and be like, it doesn't have to be wrong, like absolutely wrong or absolutely right, just because somebody thinks otherwise or the same. Like, there's shades of gray. And it was hard. It was also like I mentioned, like most of the kids feel so unlikable. Simon was the only one who wasn't. you know? And it's interesting that he stands out that way because one of the other things that I learned from like way back when we read these in like 6th grade is that supposedly Simon is an allegory for Christ. Like, he's the compassionate one who he's not like actually crucified, but like he's brutally murdered like for trying to save the kids from their own fear.
Folly.
Yeah. Like, yeah, he didn't stop them from killing them, but he can be like, oh, that wasn't the beast. Like, the beast isn't real. That was, and he also shakes off like the temptations and like sees through what the Lord of the Flies is supposedly, because the Lord of the Flies is also supposedly a parallel to Beelzebub, the like Lord of the Flies, like fallen angel, like substitute for the devil type of thing. So I thought, like, even if you don't have that context, this kid still stands out, which I think is good, like shows good writing overall. Like that you can make this character likable and somebody to like kind of make all the qualifications so that when you know the allegory, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I still like the character separate from that. It wasn't preachy, but it was interesting to like know that was a thing in the background this time. See, looks like VS Drake says, honestly, the little one stood out a lot to me. That's interesting. Felt like there was that they were pushing for in the story and that added tension for the other kids and created tension on the island. What do you think about that one, Adam?
I agree. To me, the little ones were there to give a sense of hierarchical standing to the island. They were the masses to be ruled.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Jack had his hunters, and those were like his mob. But like, the war was over. In fact, the who's going to be chief wasn't who's going to be chief of the big ones. It was who's going to be chief of the little ones, effectively. Yeah. The big ones do whatever they want. The little ones need somebody to follow.
I slightly disagree about the the big ones do whatever they want. And the big ones were the ones creating order. The little ones were the ones technically doing whatever they wanted because they didn't help out with anything. They just ate, bathed, and played. Like that was. But they did require somebody to take care of them in that respect, and they didn't participate in the politics of it, except when they like you said, they became the mob. They became the populace, like the populace. But yes, they were a burden that the older kids had to kind of bear as a part of their taking leadership roles. And unfortunately, they were kind of like just following whoever was loudest for the most part, or whoever gave them food.
Yeah. But how often do we see that mirrored in reality, though? Especially considering this is an election year, a major
God.
election year, right? It's like, oh, let me hand out the tax relief to the masses. Please vote for me, shit like that.
Yeah. 100%. And that could be like a whole conversation in and of itself. So I'll try and keep it to the book. But that is a great example of like how that allegory plays out, right?
Yep.
I'm saying allegory a lot, but like it's hard not to with the context of this particular book.
Alex allegory. We'll keep that in mind.
It was just one of those things when we went into the room to like discuss the book, like where there was a bunch of questions you had to fill out answers to, and like half of them were like about the allegorical nature of this book. So I went in kind of looking for it, but at the same time trying to keep it separate, and it just played well in, like, it definitely is what it is. Like, it is a part of the nature of this book.
Yeah.
All right. So did you have another question, or would you like me to pose one?
Yeah.
Since I don't see
Yeah, I got a topic.
All right.
So jumping to the jumping to the end of it here. So obviously all chaos is letting loose, and then they find out that, oh look, they've been rescued just in the nick of time to avoid total calamity. What do you think would have happened if they weren't rescued?
If they weren't rescued, they absolutely all would have died. Because unfortunately, I think Jack, being the type of character that he is, would have given into the quote-unquote savagery, and killed off the only person who cared about keeping the fire going. They can't create more. So even if they did manage to survive, Jack doesn't seem like the type to ration either. And there's only so many pigs on an island, only so many fruits that can grow, or one tropical storm and you're gone. There's no way that they survive purely driven by instinct and fear. Jack's also an entitled little shit. Not just a doer. I'm head boy and I can hit a C sharp. Get out of here with that mess. Welcome in Storm.
Yeah,
I completely agree. Chaos, no system to train or educate them in any way that's sustainable. Like, even if they could live into adulthood, if they did ration, I completely agree with Stormreed, is eventually, like, they would lose the ability to, like, grow in any way, and they would be effectively stuck as children, and all it would take is one event where they don't know how to deal with it, and they're done.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think really the two warring sides is over long-term versus short-term needs. And think that was the big problem, is neither side really addressed both long-term and short-term needs, which is why there was the split so dramatically. So without the sound logic of preparing for the long term, making shelters and all that, I think they were one calamity away from being totally wiped out.
Oh,
Whether
absolutely.
that be a storm or the pigs running out or something along that nature.
Stormreed, I do believe technically at the very end it mentions one of the kids had a pair of broken glasses on his hip, like tied to like a rope on his hip or something like that. So they might have had that, but even if not, I do believe, I can't remember which one it was, but it was either Simon or Roger knew how to make a bow fire starter. They just never made it. If it was Simon, yeah, they're boned. Because, but if it was Roger, I guess it depends on how crazy Roger gets, because Roger definitely goes way off the deep end.
Yeah.
Oh, so I think that kind of leads me to one of the questions that I had, and that was, I know we talked about like would they survive, but what did you think about each of the faction, like the two main factions, like that appeared when there was that split?
Obviously, I already mentioned, I think the original faction with Piggy and what's his name is very focused on long-term goals. They wanted to make the fire, they had shelters, they weren't concerned with getting food. Obviously, they had their clean source of water. um, their big focus was let's prepare for a week down the road, not today. And then the other faction was very much a we're gonna focus on whatever needs arise right now and having fun. Which I would say having fun is a short-term focus, just because you can have fun at any time, you know. But I think it represents two distinct natures of society where we can't really exist without both sides. And to reach into the allegory terminology that you're such a fond fan of tonight, Alex, I think that's an allegory towards what would happen in real life if we focused on one and not the other.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, and that's well stated by you, and the summation by V.S. Drake, the duality of society.
Yeah.
I agree that they were, very well opposed groups, and that one was, I don't think it was just short term so much as it was, I'm gonna do the thing that feels good, so that does apply to the fun, that does apply to the hunting, because like it was that thing that he liked to do, and it technically served a purpose. So that was enough for one group, and then for the other is like, no, like the ultimate purpose is to get home, and to get home we need shelters, we need these things, but we need the manpower to do it. And unfortunately, like you said, a lot of the time, like there's going to be that split, that duality of society, where there's people who are going to just do the thing that feels good, that confirms the things that they like, because they had food, they had fruit, they had things they could eat, but they needed meat, which they couldn't even cook correctly. Another reason why they would have died, freaking trichinosis, man.
They weren't there long enough to die of food poisoning or whatever.
Well, the little kids were practically doing that to themselves. I think it showed though that in both camps, and like there is a difference, but in both camps, the one that rose to the top was the one that wasn't necessarily the most mentally equipped for it, i.e. like Piggy. Like Stormy was saying, like Piggy was like, he was the mind over muscles. He was the logic. He was the one that Ralph goes to when he needed ideas and then would flip them as his own. But like, I think it shows that leadership is not always the person most mentally capable for it. It is sometimes the person who fits the role or seizes it for themselves. And that was the two separate groups of leadership. Is you have the biggest kid, the kid who was charismatic enough and athletic enough and had found the conch. So whatever divine right you want to assign to that. And then you have the guy who was going to seize it by force because he didn't like not being in charge. Yeah, and yeah. Give me the conch. Which honestly, I thought was surprisingly, like, I thought that was, I was surprised that lasted as a intermediary as long as it did, even as the faction split, right? I didn't think the Contra even slowed him down, but you can see it slowly losing its, effectiveness as the story goes.
I think the Contra was supposed to be like their tie back to reality, where they're like, it was a form of structure that would have been similar to what they would have seen in school or something.
Yeah, this is the talking stick.
Yeah. Obviously there's, like the one we know of is when you want to talk in class, you raise your hand. Kind of a similar thing. They probably had some sort of rule or regulation back in their home that was similar to a conch, and they attached their desire to get home to that. But then the longer they were there, the more removed they were from societal norms.
Well, they actually mentioned though, like we need. They actually, I think, explicitly say we need to, like, not everyone can talk at the same time, and I think this is Piggy that said it. We need to have rules, and only one person talking at the same time, like raising your hands, like in school. Like they said, raising your hands, like in school, and the conch was just kind of this. This medium for authority that was above kid level, right? Like,
yep.
That's it. So I think, that's the same as what you were saying about there being like this thing that they were
kind of
applying as like an interim representation of a higher authority.
Yeah, kind of goes to get together with what Storm said before that too, where it seemed like they started out with the rules and structure, but time made fun more important. The more they forgot about social norms in society, they less the rules mattered. Let's get into final thoughts, though. We're getting late on time.
Yeah, and I know that we have kind of a hard out tonight. Sorry for the slightly shorter one, but it's a short book, so I think that's fine.
What were your final thoughts?
So, I thought that this book was... I think it was a fun reread for as short as it was. I thought that it was nice to come at it from an adult perspective to see, one, just how well the kids are written as kids, having that perspective shift from then to now when I first read it. And it was I think a surprisingly well written book, but I was surprised at a how little the Lord of the Flies played in. It seemed like a bigger thing the first time that I read it, and it felt much smaller a part of this book than before, where it is just kind of this rotting pig's head that attracts flies, and it felt, as a kid, it felt more actually demonic and less symbolically demonic as it did when I reread it. And like being able to tie this into stuff that's happening now, into the way that humans work in general, I think it lends a lot more oomph to like importance to like reading this book. And I get why it's one of those things that like was read in classrooms for so long, and why you generally need an adult there to show you why it's important. Because like even in high school, I don't think I would have gotten all of this. Like I had my head too far up my own butt, as all teenagers do, but or most anyway. But I thought it was a fairly good read. I get the educational nature of it, and I think it does a good job of kind of showing some darker parts of humanity that I think would otherwise be are pretty hard lessons to teach. So in that way, it was pretty good. Obvious faults being some of the like signs of the times from back then being a little oversimplified in a lot of ways, but it kind of just is that way because of the kids too. And it's a bit ham-fisted with some things, but considering what it was trying to do, like you can't get too lofty with this stuff. Get too simple where you're just like, this kid's actually Jesus, you know. And it did a good job of striking that balance, but sometimes it would get a little too oversimplified for me. I'd recommend it for people who like challenging, like who like simple books that have thought-provoking premises and writing styles. I don't think this is for everybody. I think a lot of people would just get bored with it if they're not into the like analysis portion of reading.
Yeah.
Also, this is straight up, and I got this confirmed when I Googled it. This is basically a dark parody of a coral reef, which is another book that was famous at the time. Think Treasure Island. I think the kids actually mention it at the beginning when they're like, "This isn't an island, just like Treasure Island or Coral Island or things like that." Like, yeah. So,
yeah.
Those are my overall final thoughts. What about you?
So VS Drake says the book was heady. It felt like a classic. The prose was rough, but I see why they force most kids to read it. I definitely agree. The prose was kind of rough. I think that's true with any book given enough time. Just the way we talk over the decades changes, and it gets a little harder and harder to agree with prose from the past. Storm, I liked the book. He was quite surprised. It's considered a classic. Good, but not classic in my opinion. I do resonate with that too. For me, I liked it, but I'd have a hard time telling somebody, I think you should read this book because it's not a super compelling story. It's got there's nothing about it where I'm like, you've got to read this because of this thing. You've got to read this book because this one part is awesome. Nothing like that. I can definitely see why it is used in classrooms, and I think it's a fun book to think about in relation to real society. But Meh. Other than that, I think it's more geared towards kids and stuff.
I I think I want to expound a little bit on that. Yeah, I think it's geared towards kids in that it is meant to like teach younger adults lessons. I definitely wouldn't recommend this for like any actual kids. Like when I read it is probably the earliest, but I think some people would be able to handle like some of the fairly nightmarish imagery in there. But yeah, I think this is a literature nerds book. Like this is a book written for literature nerds. Like that's where its wheelhouse is people who like to dissect and analyze these things. So maybe English teachers book. This is an English teacher's book, you know, both for the student.
Yeah.
You know, I see why this why William Golding won a Nobel Prize for Literature. Like there's very clearly some very astute observation skills. Uh, I
I have no idea what chalkboard jungle is.
I have no idea if they tried to use it in that either. But yeah, this is I can see like from the quality of certain observations why William Golding won awards for literature, and I think that's kind of his wheelhouse for writing is like he writes stuff that people who like literature would like. But I think that is a fairly small subsection of the populace. And I wouldn't expect people to like it, but you know, we'll see.
I think we're gonna call that it for the night. If we want to do some quick chit chats about upcoming events and stuff, and then sign off here. Next book up is February 17th, A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. Quick forewarning for that one. Hopefully this forewarning isn't too late for anybody, but because it is in a couple of weeks here that we're going to be talking about it. But this book does have some very graphic scenes and some sexual assault. So if those sort of events trigger you, maybe steer clear of this book and pick us back up for the following book, which is for March 30th. The Legion, The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds by Brandon Sanderson is going to be our March 30th book.
Right. Oh, while we're out there, keep in mind that April is going to be our Earth Month book, so all things nature inspired will be a part of our book vote. So get out and vote for that. Also coming up in May is going to be our Bring a Friend vote. That means anybody and everybody can vote for the book for May. So get people excited now because come April we'll be able to vote for that. People will be able to vote for the May book. Also, lost my note there. What? For the May vote, there is not currently a theme, but if anybody has one as a part of all this, we do take suggestions for themes as well as for the books themselves. So if you have somebody you know who might have a good idea for a theme for May, you can bring them along for that in next for our next book in March, and maybe they'll get to see their theme up for May too.
Oh, there you go. They may give us an idea for a theme.
Maybe. We'll make this pretty quick, but any side pieces for you, Adam?
Nope.
Holiday season.
Take a break.
holiday season keeps people busy. I, on the other hand, went ham. I am rereading my way through the Stormlight archives in preparation for the next book in the series. I am currently on Oathbringer, so I made it through 2, and I'm about halfway through the 3rd one. And taking a pause because we've got only 2 weeks until our next book, so also keep that in mind. We're going to have them in pretty quick succession here.
Yep. Schedules were tight for January and February, so we had to jam these 2 together and make it fit.
Yep. And I also managed to read, thanks to my good friend and co-host Adam, book number 2 in A Prayer for the Crown Shy, the follow-up book to A Psalm for the Wild Built. Highly recommend for those of you that like to Psalm for the Wild Built. And once again, thank you, Adam.
No problem. Glad you enjoyed it.
Definitely did. All right. So anything else from you, Adam, otherwise, or from chat? Otherwise, yeah, absolutely good. Via Straight. Give it a shout out.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it then. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight for our book chat on Lord of the Flies. It was a good chat. Look forward to the next one.
Yep.
See you next book.
I'm not gonna do that. Mine has a pop can in it.